Kalin Ward stood outside the small cafe, its windows fogged over from the warmth inside, while the biting cold sank its teeth into his bones. He hadn't been on a date in years, not since losing Lena, his wife, 3 winters ago. Wing. He could almost hear her voice whispering courage into his ear, urging him to let himself live again. But it wasn't Lena who had pushed him into this blind date. It was his daughter, Meera, all of 8 years old, a spark of sunshine with 2 wise eyes. Just coffee, Daddy, she had said with hopeful insistence, a just try. So here he was, anxiety roaring in his chest, pushing through the door into the smell of roasted beans and cinnamon pastries. He took his seat at a corner table, fidgeting with his sleeve, not prepared for anything more than polite small talk. And then he heard it, the soft, uneven tap of metal on wood floors. He turned just as she walked in. Her name was Arabel Knox, though he didn't know it yet. What he saw first was the ivory sweater draped gently around her, the flush from the cold resting on her cheeks, and the pair of crutches that made her movements slow, careful, deliberate. She paused for just a second at the door, as if weighing whether to stay or run. Then her eyes met his. She made her way to the table, every step filled with bravery and fear. Kalin stood to greet her, overwhelmed by something he couldn't name. She reached his chair, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Oh, please, don't laugh at my crutches." For a moment, Kalin could only stare, stunned not by the crutches, but by the vulnerability in her tone. The way she said it, as if being laughed at, was a wound she'd been dealt before and wasn't sure she could take again. "I'm not here to laugh at anything," he said quietly. Arabel nodded, her guard dropping just an inch. As she lowered herself into the chair, Kalin realized this wasn't just a date. It was an intersection of broken hearts trying to be seen. Truly seen. And as the scent of fresh pastries wrapped around them and the snow fell silently outside, something stirred gently inside him. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of healing. The conversation between Kalin and Arabel began as a cautious dance, each question gentle, each answer carefully measured. She told him she used to be a competitive runner. Marathons, she said with the hint of a sad smile. Until the accident 2 years ago left her with a reconstruction surgery that succeeded in saving her leg, but not her mobility. He nodded, feeling a tug in his chest at the strength in her voice, the way she said, "I'm still learning to walk again," without a shred of self-pity. Kalin shared bits of his world too. His job at the hardware store, his cooking mishaps, the fact that he once burned spaghetti. They both laughed lightly, warming the cold space between them, and just as he began to feel a tightness in his chest loosen, the cafe door burst open. Daddy!" Meera's voice tore through the air like a small whirlwind wrapped in a pink coat and a mess of hair. Kalin winced. He had forgotten about her early release from school. She threw her arms around him, her backpack dangling like a runaway kite. Then, with curious eyes, she looked at Arabel. There was a pause, a child's silent evaluation. "Are you hurt?" she asked, genuine kindness in her tone. Arabel froze for a moment before offering a gentle smile. "Not anymore," she said, bringing her crutches into view. "I'm just learning a new way to move." That seemed to satisfy Meera, who plopped herself into a chair beside her dad, instantly opening her notebook to show off messy crayon drawings. To Kalin's astonishment, Arabel leaned in and admired each one like precious art. She laughed softly at Meera's stories, her eyes sparkling, and for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, Kalin saw Meera connect with someone new. A real connection. The kind his wife once brought effortlessly. Minutes slipped into an hour, filled with conversations that grew lighter and warmer, as if the 3 of them were weaving something fragile yet hopeful. Then Meera whispered, just loud enough to hear, "Daddy doesn't smile this much for anyone." Kalin's face flushed red, but Arabel only glanced down shyly, almost as if she was memorizing the moment. Outside, snowflakes began to swirl faster against the windows, and inside the cafe, a feeling of unexpected family, fragile yet real, wrapped softly around them all. The afternoon settled into a kind of peaceful rhythm neither Kalin nor Arabel had expected, the golden cafe light dimming only slightly as the winter sun began to sink. Meera was now curled up in her chair, sketching snowflakes and crooked stick figures while Kalin and Arabel talked quietly, voices soft, almost afraid to disturb the fragile magic of the moment. Occasionally, Arabel would stretch or shift slightly, each movement deliberate as if trying to ease a growing ache in her leg. Kalin noticed the tension etched lightly across her face. He didn't say anything, not wanting to make her uncomfortable, but when her breath hitched as she tried to stand, he instinctively reached out his hand. She hesitated, only a heartbeat, but then placed her small hand in his, her fingers trembling with relief or embarrassment. He wasn't sure. He helped her up gently, his touch steady but careful. Outside, snow swirled like soft white confetti already blanketing the street. They moved slowly, side by side, while Meera hopped ahead, chirping about snow angels and candy canes. At the curb, Arabel stopped and turned to him, her breath visible in the cold air. Thank you for today, she murmured, her voice layered with unspoken emotions. I almost didn't come inside. I was so scared. Kalin stepped closer, his gaze sincere. Why? He asked softly. Her grip tightened on her crutch. A people stare, or avoid me altogether. They pity me sometimes, or worse, pretend I'm invisible. Her eyes reflected the hurt of years bottled tight. I didn't want to ruin your day, or make this awkward. You lost someone. I'm not whole. Blah. Kalin's voice was barely a whisper, but certain. Arabel, I never saw your crutches first. I saw you. Her eyes shimmered with something fragile and beautiful. Before she could speak again, Meera tugged on her coat and said with perfect, childlike certainty, I hope you come back. Daddy looked happy today. The words hit harder than the cold ever could. Arabel knelt slowly, brushing Meera's hair back and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Then she stood, her expression full of quiet gratitude. She glanced once more at Kalin, longing, promises, and a hint of fear wrapped in her gaze before stepping into the waiting car. Snowflakes gathered silently in her hair, and as Kalin watched her leave, he felt something melt within, something warm, hopeful, and terrifyingly alive. The days that followed were quiet but full of murmuring thoughts Kalin couldn't quite shake off. He found himself replaying Arabel's smile, the way her fingers had trembled slightly in his palm, and the softness in her eyes when Meera spoke. Meera, of course, had no such reservations. She asked about a Miss Arabel daily, reminding her dad of the way she listened to stories and didn't mind the messy drawings. One snowy evening, as Kalin tossed together a haphazard dinner of grilled cheese and soup, his phone buzzed, an unexpected message from Arabel. A coffee again, maybe a walk this time. A slow one, I mean. He couldn't help but smile, the kind of smile that warmed the cold grief still lodged in his chest. The next morning they met at the same café, but it felt different, lighter. This time Kalin had brought Meera, and instead of sitting inside, they stepped out into the gently falling snow. Arabel moved slower than Meera, her crutches sinking slightly into the fresh snow, but she didn't falter. Kalin stayed beside her, the pace matching her own, creating a rhythm of shared steps. They walked past glowing shop windows and quiet parks, the world momentarily wrapped in soft white silence. Meera ran ahead to build a crooked snowman, and Kalin turned toward Arabel. There was something new in her expression, still cautious but hopeful, like a door cracked open just enough to let in light. I'm not used to this, she admitted softly, to being seen without being judged. Kalin nodded, swallowing against the lump in his throat. I'm still learning how to open up too, he confessed. My wife, she was my anchor. Losing her, I didn't know how to breathe again. Arabel's eyes glistened with empathy, not pity. Maybe we're both learning to walk again, she whispered. At that precise moment, Meera ran back and wrapped them both in a snow-dusted hug. Arabel bent down, a bit awkwardly yet tenderly, and hugged her back. And there, between a half-built snowman and two hearts that had once been shattered, something quiet but undeniable bloomed. Not a dramatic promise. Not an instant fairy tale, just the beginning of a second chance. Kalin reached for Arabel's hand, not to steady her this time, but to hold it gently. And as she let her fingers interlace with his, the entire winter day seemed to exhale in relief. This wasn't just healing, it was the start of something wonderfully new.